BBC World Service. And now the second in our series, India, a People Partitioned. This week, Andrew Whitehead returns to what 50 years ago were the killing fields of Punjab.
Schoolboys summoned to their classes in the sleepy Punjabi village of Torkalsa, a short drive from the Pakistani city of Rawalpindi. A plaque on the wall of the single-storey building records that it was built in 1931 by a local Sikh. But no Sikh boy has been to this school for 50 years. A one Sikh village is now 100% Muslim. Though once in a while, say the locals, Sikhs now settled across the border in India do come back to glimpse again the place where they grew up.
When
they come here, they weep. It's just like anyone leaving his home, then coming back years later and seeing it again. They come up to people here and embrace them. They cry a lot. They talk about how things were. The house that stood on this spot, the building that used to be on that road. They still have the old map of the village in their minds. The Sikhs were educated people, and in those days, not many people were.
Those Sikhs who come to Torkalsa do so secretly. The area is close to what's reputed to be Pakistan's nuclear weapons plant and closed to foreigners, especially Indians. My visit there was also, shall we say, unauthorised. But for Sikhs, this village has become a place of pilgrimage to their martyrs of 1947. That March, the partition violence which had left thousands dead elsewhere in India descended on Punjab. Conflicting national aspirations had sparked off furious communal rivalry. The battle was between Muslims on one side and Sikhs and Hindus on the other. The Sikhs of Torkalsa were besieged by thousands of Muslims. They feared that their attackers would rape, pillage and forcibly convert. Rather than risk such dishonour, some preferred suicide. Bir Bahadur Singh, a devout Sikh with a flowing white beard, now lives in Delhi. But as a boy of 10, he witnessed most of the young women of his village take their own lives by jumping into a well.
फिर वो कहने लगे चलो एक वहाँ कुआं था पानी पीने के प्यास थी ना वहाँ जिस जगह थे वहाँ पानी.
The women started saying, let's go to the well and get some water. There had been no water to drink for 2 or 3 days. So they all went as a group. There must have been 300 or 400 of us. At the well, they were surrounded by Muslim attackers. They thought they were going to be abducted. One old man, Tahiguru, threw money at them. The Muslims started scrabbling for it. Sadani, large cow, she started reciting a Sikh prayer. I didn't want to jump in the well. I didn't want to die. I was holding my baby brother and clutching on to my mother. My father had been killed just the day before and she was still in a stupor. She was in her 40s then. And most of the older women didn't jump. But none of the younger women came back alive from that well.
Bir Bahadur Singh's mother, Basant Kaur, is now in her 90s and remembers every moment of that fateful day. 84 women and children jumped to their deaths down that well, she says. They jumped to save themselves from humiliation. First, an older woman, who quickly said a prayer, then closed her eyes and disappeared down the well. Then 2 men. After that, all the women and children at the front of the crowd followed. She told me how, as more women jumped, the water gradually rose in the well, just like a tandoor oven fills up with cow dung, she said. Death before dishonour, in the best traditions of Sikhism, a religion with a strong martial tradition and powerful sense of valour and self-respect. Those Torkalsa Sikhs who survived massacre and mass suicide were rescued by the army. 2 weeks later, the novelist Bisham Sani, then a political worker based in Rawalpindi, travelled to the village with the health official given the task of retrieving the bodies and disinfecting the well.
It was a gruesome spectacle. People would say, somebody standing by my side would say, that was my wife and that was my sister and so on and so forth. Little children entangled in their legs. You see, we were standing by the well, where the women who had jumped into the well, their bodies had come up, bloated. one of the Sikh youth, young boy, standing by my side, pointed out to me and said, "Look at that dead body, that is my wife's dead body. And you see the bracelet on her wrist, it is a gold bracelet. I got it for her. Now I want it back because I have no resources." I said, it's not possible. Body is uploaded, nobody is going to help you take the bracelet off a dead body. And he quarreled with me, he shouted at me, he said, "You must help me. It is after all with my money that I had got her this bracelet." That is how it was.
The fate of the Sikh women of Torkalsa formed the centrepiece of Bisham Sani's novel, Tamas, or Darkness. In the film made from it, the well scene is the most memorable. It's become the most powerful image of Punjab's partition agony. But just the day before, Bir Bahadur Singh had witnessed an event etched still more vividly on his memory, when his father summoned everyone in the extended family and offered to kill those who might face rape or torture at the hands of the besiegers.
तो सबसे पहले गांव का एक कुल्ली था, तो वो आया राम सिंह.
The first was a village labourer, Ram Singh. He told my father, "I've got a bad knee, I can't run away, and I don't want to be made a Muslim. Kill me." My father beheaded him with his kirpan, the Sikh sword. Later my sister was brought up. My father picked up the sword, but it got snagged in her shawl. She untangled it herself. My father struck with the sword and her head went flying off. 28 girls were killed in front of my eyes. When I think of that scene, but I'm proud too. The spirit of the Sikh Gurus, that was the spirit our people followed.
वो सीन जब याद आता है तो बहुत बार फख्र भी है उस सीन के ऊपर कि जो गुरु गोबिंद सिंह ने जो स्पिरिट दिखाई थी वो स्पिरिट पूरी हुई.
जिन्हां ਸਿੰਘਾਂ ਸਿੰਘਣੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਧਰਮੇਤ ਸੀਸ ਦਿੱਤੇ ਬੰਦ ਕਟਵਾਏ ਖੋਪੜੀਆਂ ਲਵਾਈਆਂ.
In Sikh prayers to this day, special tribute is paid to those who were beheaded or jumped down a well to save their honour. Torkalsa was not the only such incident. Partition lined up the three religious communities of Punjab in a conflict of enormous ferocity. The fertile plains became killing fields. The violence was more brutal, more bestial here than anywhere else. Hardly any Hindus or Sikhs in the Muslim-majority areas which became Pakistan chose to stay. The migration of Muslims from Indian Punjab was almost as complete. Millions moved to and fro, hundreds of thousands were slaughtered. Bir Bahadur Singh has had 50 years to reflect on why communities which had been so close suddenly became such bitter enemies. He believes that the root cause was everyday discrimination against Muslims.
हमारा दोस्ती था पर सिर्फ हमारा खान पीन जो है वो खान पीन साझा नहीं था.
We were friends, but we didn't eat together. If a Muslim called on us, we'd sit him down, but he couldn't eat from our plates. Our elders wouldn't eat anything cooked by Muslims. When we went to a Muslim home, they gave us uncooked food. They would eat our food, but we wouldn't have anything cooked by them. We looked down on them. If a dog touched the same hand that was carrying food, that was okay. But if a Muslim did, we'd throw away the food. That was all wrong. It shouldn't have happened.
It led to a deep and abiding resentment. Altaf Gohar was brought up in Lahore and became one of Pakistan's top newspaper editors. He still feels a burning sense of injustice that in his college years, Muslims got such a raw deal.
I think my Muslim friends and I, we had a tremendous sense of pride in the Punjab. We also had a great sense that physically we were stronger and we could knock the hell out of them. So it wasn't that you felt an outcast. You just felt that somehow you had been left out or marginalized, even though they were in a majority. Muslims in Punjab had become a very repressed class. I mean, all the teachers, all the engineers, all the lawyers, they were all Hindus or Englishmen. Very, very few Muslims in the profession.
I deliberately made myself into a pro-Muslim because I felt that, all this had come about because of the venom we stored in our bodies against the Muslims.
Khushwant Singh, a Sikh, was a prominent lawyer in Lahore. He left for India a few days before independence. His novel, Train to Pakistan, is the most widely read account of a division of India that he says had become inescapable.
I think the distance that had been created between the Muslim and the non-Muslim, really there were two communities in this country. The Christians didn't matter very much. Sikhs were always regarded part of the Hindu community. But the British had brought that feeling about that we were two different people. I don't think they deliberately divided us to be able to rule. I think that's a cliche which I don't think has much substance, except for giving separate electorates. That Muslims could only vote for Muslims, and that I think was a very mischievous move. But they had sown those seeds which sprouted into the demand for partition.
The way in which a deep sense of injustice and different national aspirations were turned into a raging hatred, that was largely the work of politicians. Every afternoon in the months leading up to partition, Gurdial Singh, a Sikh police superintendent in the riot-stricken city of Lahore, had to submit a report on all the cases of murder, arson and riot. And he's convinced the ringleaders were the politicians. Politicians from various parties, Hindu, Muslim and Sikh, communal and supposedly secular.
To be very frank with you, all sorts of politicians. I have no doubt that it was organized by Muslims, by Hindus in retaliation also, political leaders of various organizations, and people who were in public life. They were, of course, doing it all to in the interest of their own communities, but they were the people who were at the back of it.
There was a mirror image feel to much of the violence. If those Sikhs in Muslim-majority districts were mainly victims, in other areas they were the aggressors. Maskur Hussain is a professor of Urdu in Pakistan, but was born in a part of Punjab which stayed with India. The family thought they were safe. His father was in the police. But in the days immediately after partition, a mainly Sikh mob killed 2 young men from the family and then surrounded the house.
I was the only survivor out of those people. Out of 35 members, I was the only survivor. All were killed there. My wife, my younger daughter, only 1.5 years old she was, and my mother and my sister, my brother, my grandfather, my grandmother, all were killed there. तो वो जनाब हमारे मामूजाद बहन थी, उसकी शादी होने वाली थी.
My uncle had a daughter who was about to get married to one of the boys who died first. He said to her, "Come on, we'll make you a bride." He shot her with a pistol. There was blood everywhere, and she just slumped down. My uncle said, "Look, my daughter's become a bride." He said to the other women, "What's going to happen to you?" They said they had knives and they would kill themselves. He said, "No, I'll kill you." He started slashing at his wife, but it's as if he had become blind. She screamed, "Why are you just stabbing me? Kill me!" But he couldn't. Then he started a fire. His wife died in the blaze. He ran outside. They shot him down straight away. He was shouting, "Allahu Akbar." They cut his body up and burnt it.
Shingara Singh, a stoutly built Sikh, shouts instructions to workers building a water culvert in his wheat fields outside the Indian city of Amritsar. He says he's 96, a claim you take more seriously after meeting his grey-bearded son and seeing his great-grandchildren. Shingara Singh, staff in hand, 6 foot tall and with a vice-like handshake, is proud of the number of Muslims he killed half a century ago.
I and my friend took our horses around. I rode my horse all around the place, and we had pakka rifles and we had other weapons, and we killed a lot of Muslims. I had a sword first which broke, and then I got a new sword, and that was a good sword. And when I killed a Muslim, his head would just go flying off.
Why did you want to kill Muslims?
The Muslims killed lots of our people on the other side, we were told. They killed a lot of Sikhs that side. So we killed in retaliation over here. Everybody knows over here. You ask anybody in these villages, they'll tell you Shingara Singh killed a lot of Muslims.
But you did it because you were angry at the time, but afterwards did you feel sorry?
My anger has yet not cooled down. I say even if I find Muslims today, I'll kill them.
On the other side of the partition line, the village of Alipur Sayadam attracts the Muslim faithful who come to pray at the burial shrine of a revered holy man. Here, another old man speaking Punjabi tells tales of partition vengeance. Muhammad Mir, it has to be said, admits to some remorse, but he makes no secret of the fact that he was part of an armed gang which harried Hindus and Sikhs.
I
went once towards Jammu. There was a place called Abdal Fort. We killed 2 people and stole a horse and took whatever guns and ammunition we could find. We killed because we knew Muslims were being slaughtered in India.
It's as if every whisper about a killing on the other side came to echo so loudly it had to be avenged. Sitting alongside me at Muhammad Mir's tea stall, listening to his tales, was another villager, Shaukat Ali Shirazi. He remembers the incident which triggered much of the local killing, when an ambush train carrying Muslim refugees from India staggered into the local station.
It was full of dead bodies.
And where did it come to?
In Narwal.
You saw it at Narwal station?
Yes. I went on foot there, then about 8 miles away from here. Went to see that train.
And who were the people killed?
Refugees.
Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs?
No Muslims who migrated from India to Pakistan. Women was mostly abducted, taken away.
And you saw these bodies?
Yes, I saw myself.
It must have made people very, very angry.
Of course. After that, a train from Sialkot side was going to Amritsar side, taking refugees.
Non-Muslims?
Non-Muslims. And that train was attacked by the local peoples about 5 miles from here, and heavy bloodshed was caused.
And that was because people had seen what had happened to the other train?
Yes, that was the main reason.
A sickening spiral of violence. In September, 3 weeks after partition, the man-made tornado struck the market town of Dinga, a once Hindu-dominated trading centre in what had just become Pakistan. Nowadays, Dinga's mosques have no rivals. The Hindu temples and Sikh gurdwaras closed down half a century ago. I came across one Sikh holy place, cakes of cow dung now dry on what would have been a temple wall. Drupti Devi, well in her 70s, describes herself as the last Hindu in Dinga, a town where once non-Muslims monopolised the markets, money lending and all the modest positions of authority. She chose to stay when almost all her co-religionists fled, but concedes she was lucky to evade the Muslim looters.
Dinga boy amiran da shahar thi, lokan aam kharab kita hai muslimanon ne.
Dinga was a wealthy town, but the Muslims here were very poor, and the rich were the main target during the riots. The whole place went up in flames. They looted the whole town. I reckon our family lost 500,000 rupees. There were so many killings, we lost count. We all ran and ran from one house to another, and that's how we survived.
The attackers were by and large from the villages surrounding Dinga, though they certainly got help from some Muslim townfolk. In the streets of what was once the Hindu quarter, I met Mahamuddin, 15 years old and newly married at the time of the riots.
The massacre happened like this. Muslims came from the surrounding villages. They attacked the Hindus here. There were bodies littering the streets. They were left stinking here for a whole month.
Why did people hate Hindus and Sikhs so much?
There was a lot of hatred. The two governments hated each other, and that affected how the people thought about each other.
Hundreds of non-Muslims, perhaps more than 1,000, were killed in Dinga in a matter of 2 or 3 days. Krishna Baldev Ved, a Hindu, was there to spend his college vacation with his family. His father was a tax clerk. They could all feel the menacing mood stalking the town, but had nowhere to flee. They had, however, arranged a hiding place in a shed owned by a Muslim acquaintance. And from that bolt hole, Ved was appalled to recognize the voice of a man he knew well, a hakim, a traditional Muslim healer, coordinating the attack.
And I remember, very clearly that I could, throughout the night and the day, I could hear him somewhere perched on some rooftop, giving orders to the marauders, do this, go to that house, go to that. I mean, this is the madness part of it. I could never associate him with killing. He was such a saintly-looking man with a flowing beard and a, panj namazi, and, offered his prayers 5 times, a very good hakim. But he was involved, It was an awful feeling, that we could hear the gunshots. We could guess from the shouting that people were being killed, that fire, several houses were on fire, and it was just, we were numb with terror. I remember that my father was quiet, but my mother was constantly mumbling something, prayers and stuff. Everybody was tense and short-tempered also. They were searching out the hidden people and thronging the lane outside and suspecting that there are people. So we had very tense moments, throughout those 36 or 40 hours, I don't know how many.
Their ordeal ended only when the army arrived. The Ved family, including Yashpal, the youngest, not quite in his teens, emerged from their hiding place and gathered with the other surviving Hindus and Sikhs before being taken to a refugee camp.
As we came out, I could see some of the horses burnt, not all the horses, because as I told you, the horses which were adjoined to the Muslims were not burnt, they were not put. And I could see maybe 2 or 3 dead bodies lying on the street itself. And we came to that place, refugee, in that hospital or community space maybe, where we saw people weeping. Yeah. And then as people were trying to console each other and weeping and embracing and all that was a very bad. I could remember it.
I was looking for my friends, school friends, and I found that one of them had been killed. And he had been married, he was very young, but he was married early. He was married to the sister of another friend of ours, mutual friend. And she was raped, and she was pregnant. He had been married a year earlier, and she was raped. And there I saw that girl whom I knew as a, schoolboy, and who was very beautiful, and we all used to have sort of puppy love for her. And she had tried to jump from something. She had probably had a miscarriage already, or she was going through the miscarriage, I'm not sure. But I used to go and sit with her and her mother. And she had this huge gaping wound in her forehead, which was being treated in a very bad way by some poor doctor who didn't have the didn't have anything. And she was dying, in other words. And but she used to talk deliriously, incoherent stuff, for days. It was so painful.
That young rape victim did not survive, one among countless Punjabi casualties of partition. Half a century on, Punjabis have not fully come to terms with the enormity of their own actions. There's no point asking how the communities get on today. Punjab has been segregated more completely than any other part of the subcontinent. On the Indian side, which before 1947 had a large Muslim minority, Muslims today make up 1% of the population. The proportion of Hindus and Sikhs in Pakistan Punjab is lower still. Nighat Saeed Khan, a Pakistani feminist and researcher on partition, has the most convincing explanation I've heard for the intensity of Punjab's civil war. The people behaved, she says, with all the anger and pent-up emotion of a cheated lover.
These people were very close, whatever their troubled history. They had lived together. They had loved each other. There was relationships of extreme passion, and the disillusionment, the betrayal was just as great. And that violence actually comes from that sense of betrayal. Both sides felt they had been let down by the other. And so this other was the sort of enormous intensity of the other, the sort of hatred that comes from love. And I believe that the silence on it, of being involved in that violence, is that because the other was so much a part of oneself, that it was, if anything, an internecine war. And that's not something that one likes to, even in history, admit to.
That programme was compiled and presented by Andrew Whitehead and produced by Zina Rohan. Next week, The Tearing of the Veil.